servitude, that addiction, and that lack of self-control becomes something that competes with even that lofty desire to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we have conflicting interests where the heart, a person's iman, desires to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and seeks the rida and the pleasure of Allah, and yet the body desires something else. So we train ourselves. We put ourselves through this month of discipline, this month of blessings, this month of spiritual and physical abstinence for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so that we become better people. And in that process, it's not just what we do for ourselves and the growth that we have that is spiritual, but it's also a sense of empathy. There's also a feeling within our hearts, in our bellies, that this is how millions of people live throughout the world. Where we abstain from eating. Throughout the day, we feel the cravings, and sometimes we get used to it as time goes on. We get used to those cravings. But then as we get closer to iftar, even then, the body, because we're human beings, still feels hunger, right? It's not something that you can get rid of. It's not something you can erase. It's not something that mentally you can say, this is not something that I will be affected by, because that's how we were made. Our body needs sustenance. It needs bounty. It needs the rizq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when it is halal, it is both good for the body and it's also good for the soul. So when we're able to feel that, and if we're able to contemplate and to think, there's people who at the end of their hunger don't have the iftar that we have. At the end of feeling that pain in their stomach, that weakness in their bones, they do not have something where they can break that hunger. They can deal with their crisis and go back to eating as if it was normal. There's a lot of people that don't have that luxury, and there's no happy iftar at the end of that discipline. Because it's not something that is done by choice, but it is done because of circumstances. It's done because society has forgotten those that they don't see or care about. And this is important because Ramadan is not just about thinking what's in your best interest, right? Ramadan is about community. Ramadan is about feeling the pain that others are going through so that you can fulfill your responsibility as a Muslim brother or even just as a human being. This is what we learn from our religion. And it's not just Ramadan. If we look at Ramadan in terms of the iftars, if we look at Eid al-Fitr, on Eid al-Fitr, what do we order to give? Zakat al-Fitr, right? Zakat al-Fitr, we give money so that on the day of Eid, the people who don't have what we have, the people in need, that they can also have a happy Eid. But in America, a lot of the money that we give, we think that this is what was traditionally given, that you just give money. Yes, it's a valid option. But what is the actual sunnah? You know what Zakat al-Fitr, Ma'al al-Fitr was supposed to be? Zakat, it was meant to be food. You give grains, you would give wheat, you would give staples in a person's home so that they can actually eat on the day of Eid. So for you, if it's a feast, if it's a celebration, it's a time of happiness, it's connected to food. What person can be happy and celebrate without food? If you look at all of our opportunities of celebration, food is involved. You can't be happy on the day of Eid, on the day of happiness, if you don't have something in your stomach. And this is why the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, our religion teaches us on the Eid that you pay Zakat al-Fitr so that people get something in their stomach. And it's not just Eid al-Fitr that's coming up, Eid al-Adha, the Qurbani that's given, the sacrifice of the animal that is given. Why is that given? What is the purpose of doing that? It's to feed the hungry. It's to feed the people that months can go by and they haven't tasted protein, they haven't tasted meat. Or if they had, it's limited, it's expensive, it's difficult. You're including people in the blessing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you. And that's not a small thing. We should never take that for granted. Matter of fact, it's a priority. For Eid al-Adha, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, it's mentioned in a hadith, he told the companions that before, I used to tell you that you should not store more than 3 days meat. If you have more than the meat that you need for 3 days, give the rest away. But now, since there's more people that have affluent, there's more people that can do the sacrifice, there's more people that can do the qurbani themselves, and there's more Muslims who have wealth, and there's more blessings, right? This was in the later days of Islam. There was more barakah, there was more rizq, there was more success and prosperity. So in those days, then Rasulullah said, okay, now the situation has changed. So when you do your qurbani, do with it what you want. Eat from it, save it, give it in charity. It's your choice. And this is why we have those sections that we give a portion for ourselves, a portion for family and friends, a portion for the poor. But prior to that, the actual command was that you keep a little bit to yourself and the rest feed the hungry, feed the poor. Because there were sahabis of the Prophet ﷺ, companions, members of the community that did not eat, that could not eat, that did not have enough to feed their families or their children. What does this tell us about Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam? It tells us the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam first made it a priority that you feed the hungry, and when there's enough, then you can do whatever you want. But it wasn't how it is now, where we act as if the money, the wealth, the blessings, the risk, the food that we have, that we can do whatever we want with it. And if there's someone else who's hungry, that's not my problem. That's not something I should worry about. That's not something I should concern myself about. That's someone else's responsibility. But that's not the case. The case that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam established by his sunnah was very, very clear. A man came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and said, Ya Rasulullah, tell me the best trait, a characteristic, something good that I can do. And you know what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told him? The Prophet said, feed the hungry. Feed people that are hungry. And then he said, spread the salam. Whether it's for people that you know or people that you don't recognize. For both. You don't just say salam to the people that you know. You say it to every Muslim, everyone you recognize, that this is my brother or sister in Islam. Spread the salam. Very basic things. Feed people who are hungry and spread the salam. This is our religion. There's so much that we can do in our day-to-day lives without putting a burden on ourselves. There's so much prosperity. There's so much privilege, especially living in America. Right? If you look at the world, if you look at what's happening in parts of like Ukraine, right? It was the breadbasket of Europe or that part of the world. Now, because of the war, because of what's going on, there's genuine fears that there's not going to be enough food in Europe or other parts. And the people who have money, they'll be fine. But there's going to be a lot of people that are going to fall below that threshold where they're not going to be able to afford bread. And that's just a current example. This was happening in Syria. This was happening in Iraq. This was happening in other parts of the world. But when we were living in this country, and for us, it was a matter of a few pennies, a few cents, a few dollars, we still ate our fill. Not concerned that this is something that we have to care about. Not remembering that Rasulullah said, feed the hungry. In another place, he said, who are the best of people? He said, the people that feeds other people. This was the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And then we ignore the sunnah, and we don't realize how big of a thing this is. Especially if we claim to be believers. We're mu'min. We believe in Allah. We follow the example of Rasulullah ﷺ. What does that really mean? What's the difference between us and those people in Surah Mudaththir? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, مَا سَلَكَكُمْ فِي سَقَرٍ. Right? What resulted, what caused you to end up in Jahannam? What led to your failure and destruction? Because the ultimate failure is what? Is not missing out on the opportunities that we have in life, right? This is a temporary dunya. The ultimate failure is missing out on Allah's rahmah, Allah's mercy, Allah's forgiveness on the Day of Judgment, and ending up in Jahannam. That is the greatest failure. Now, when the question is asked, when the angels ask these people who are going to be in Jahannam, that what was the reason that you ended up in Jahannam? Valid question. We need to know that so we can avoid it. You know what they say? That we weren't people that used to pray. He didn't pray. And then the ayah right after that, prayer is important. You all understand that, right? The salat, an obligation, a pillar of our religion. But right after that, they say, we would not feed the poor. We wouldn't feed people. So right after salah, the second thing they said that resulted in them ending up in Jahannam is that they wouldn't feed the people that were poor, hungry, needed support. We ignore them as if this is not my problem. This is not my concern. But that led to them ending up where they didn't do other things that would have been beneficial. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to open a person's heart, right? Allah opens that person's heart through compassion, empathy, for feeling for people. When a person stops caring about other people and he's only hustling, grinding in life for his own selfish pleasure, his only goal is to be as successful as possible because that's something that gives him fulfillment, because it's a personal desire, personal ambition, without regard to family, without regard to friends or community or neighbors. When it came to neighbors, the Rasulullah told a Sahabi, I believe it was Abu Zar, he was telling him that when you cook food, when you're making a broth, just add extra water. What a practical, easy answer. Rasulullah is telling him, look, just add extra water and give some to your neighbor. Give some food to your neighbor. That even when you're cooking, right? We all cook. We all make food for ourselves. But in that moment, Rasulullah is reminding him that when you are preparing food for yourself, for your family, don't ignore your neighbor. Don't forget the person that lives next door. Don't ignore the person. Maybe he's in a situation where he hasn't eaten for days. And you would think, wait, that's not realistic. Who's not eating right now? No, there's people that are not eating. There's people that are food insecure, meaning they don't have enough nutritional value in terms of their food, their meals in their homes, that their families, their children, everyone suffers in that house. And I think the number right now is around 38 million people, Americans, if we talk about our country. 38 million Americans are food insecure. They don't have enough to eat. And amongst them, there's 12 million children. 12 million children are hungry in this country. So when we think, well, this is third world country problems, right? This is not something I have to worry about. This is something their governments should worry about. No, this is something that is happening in this country. There's people that don't have enough to eat, but they don't qualify for government assistance. Because that's the next question we ask. That's not my job. That's the government's job. But there's people who can't get enough food, and the government is not giving them because they don't qualify. They're not poor enough, so they're kind of in the middle. You're hungry, but you're not poor enough to get support. What do? They go to food banks. They go to places set up by people to help them, to assist them, to supplement the need that is clearly present in our community. A missed opportunity for Muslims that we should not ignore, that this is one of the roles that we have to play. Because a person's stomach, right? A person's well-being, their happiness, the dignity that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to man. That's something that you can achieve through this form of generosity, compassion, and mercy. We don't ignore people thinking this is not our job. This is not my responsibility. No. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to hold people accountable on the Day of Judgment. There's people that are going to be questioned that when you were given so much, Hadith al-Qudsi, Allah Himself says that I was hungry and you did not feed me. And the person on the Day of Judgment will say, Ya Allah, you're the master of the worlds. How are you hungry? You have everything. Allah is going to say that my servant was hungry. And if you fed him, you would have found reward and ajr with me. People that are hungry, when we feed them, this is not you doing them a favor, but this is a responsibility that you have so that others can enjoy the same privilege, the same benefits that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you. And the time for iftar, when you feel that moment of joy, when you feel that moment of relief, that after a long day of fasting, that you're finally able to enjoy the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we don't just do that for ourselves. We share that with others, right? We do iftars, we have parties, we invite people, we want everyone to be involved. Alhamdulillah, that's a blessed thing. You want to feed people at the time of iftar because of the hadith of Rasulullah that if you help someone do their iftar, all the blessings, the reward, the ajr of their day, whatever good they did during their fast, the person who helped that person break his fast will get that reward as well. You will get the same reward as the person who worked hard, recited the Quran, prayed, gave sadaqah, did whatever he needed to do to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala during the day. And you will get all of that because of the iftar that you provided that hungry person at the time of his breaking of his fast. We don't take that for granted. But what about those du'as? The person who did du'a, Ya Allah, my stomach. Ya Allah, my children are hungry. Ya Allah, I don't have enough, I'm in between jobs. Ya Allah, this is the situation, you know best. And we know people like that. In this pandemic, a lot of things have been exacerbated, right? A lot of things have been amplified and made worse. So the situation that was bad is now tragic. And our priorities sometimes are not correct, and it's everywhere. And we have to realign our intentions, realign our motivations, and get out of this selfish mindset and remind ourselves that we have a responsibility. And that responsibility does not go away by being negligent or indifferent or thinking that this is someone else's job. All of us will be questioned. All of us will be responsible. All of us have a duty to do better when it comes to these affairs. When we look at colleges and high schools, there's children that have meal plans, but they can't pay at the end of the month, right? And they just get debt over debt to the point where they're cut off, that you can't eat at school anymore because your parents haven't paid the bill. We hear it in the news all the time, that children at schools, young children, and when a child is not given enough nutrition, it affects their behavior, it affects their development, it affects their intellect, so it sets them up for failure for the rest of their lives. So when we see these communities that are facing hunger, right, their problem is hunger. It's not that they can't compete with your children. It's not that they don't have those talents and those skills and those abilities that will set them up for success in the future. It's just that they're hungry. A lot of that can be alleviated, but we have these systems that are set up where those same schools will have hundreds of thousands of dollars for the sports program. They will have hundreds and thousands of dollars for all these other projects. And I'm not saying they're bad. I'm just saying our priorities are messed up. And I've heard, alhamdulillah, there's a masjid I believe in the Bay Area in California. And I saw this and it made my heart smile, right? These Muslims who lived in this very affluent, very rich part of the Bay Area. Bay Area is not cheap, by the way, right? Very expensive, very nice area. These Muslims in this masjid, all the people that were coming to iftar were very rich people. And iftar kind of ended up being like this social thing, right? It wasn't really to help feed people who needed help. So this masjid, what they did was they created a partnership with another masjid in a part of town that was not wealthy. They had a partnership. So whenever they would do iftar, as part of their iftar, they would have an extra expense to cover the iftars at that other masjid where they could not afford to sponsor iftars. So this masjid in the Bay Area, and for the people who were sponsoring, not a big deal. A few $100s did not make a difference to them whatsoever. But it was the thought, it was the idea that if we're going to eat, then my brother is going to eat as well. If we are living in a community where Allah has blessed us, then we're not going to be blind to that masjid or that community or that inner city masjid and imam or congregation that's doing the best that they can do, and they're surviving and they're thriving, but they need help. And they need the same support that we take for granted at our locations. And it was the idea, maybe we can do something like that in the future, I don't know. But the idea of having these partnerships so that when you eat, your your brother eats. When you are successful, your brother is going to be set up for success as well. That you will live and nurture, not just by a few actions, by your very character, your very practice of Islam, compassion, empathy, and mercy. If we're able to do that successfully, then you will see our communities grow. You will see the spiritual development. You will see Ramadan actually transform people. Some people are hungry at the end of the day and at the end of the month. And all they get out of it is they lost 10 pounds. And that's not the only purpose of Ramadan. If we don't care about what's happening in homes, in communities, or in families, and you would be surprised. You would be surprised by the people that are struggling. And there's a lot of people who have immense dignity. They will never put their hand out. They would never go and ask someone for a favor. But those are the people that need the help the most. May Allah give us tawfiq to have that level of vision, that level of mercy. And to be from the ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that would include people in his food and would tell people, add extra water so that the neighbor's not hungry. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for us, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us great opportunities. And we do have opportunities. And maybe this is a good time to announce it. Inshallah, from the first, from April, the first Saturday of the month, and this will be our first time doing it, on behalf of Rahma Center of Charlotte, we're going to sponsor breakfast at the local homeless shelter, the men's shelter. We're going to go, we're going to serve breakfast, and we're going to give them a hot meal. And I remember we started doing this years ago. And we thought we're just there doing our part, our role, and it's not a big deal. I found out 6 years later, serving at that men's shelter, that because of the money that we were donating, because of the time we were giving on Saturday, that was the only hot meal that they got. So all the other days they were getting breakfast. They weren't getting hot breakfast. They weren't getting the menu that we were providing. We would provide turkey sausage. We would provide eggs. We would provide muffins. Sometimes they would get other things, and they would get coffee. And they had a decent, with dignity, a breakfast that was worthy of a human being. And we thought this was something that was happening every day, and it wasn't. So now, alhamdulillah, we're adding an extra day because the other masjid does it on the 3rd. We're going to, inshallah, do it on the 1st. And the first volunteering opportunity is going to be the first day of Ramadan, right? Potentially, right? So it's going to be on Saturday, which will be the first day of fasting for us, hopefully. And we're going to go, we're going to volunteer, we're going to sponsor the breakfast. And they usually have around 100 to 150, and sometimes even 200 people that are staying there at that men's shelter. And giving them a hot meal, wallah, is important, it's necessary, and it's a debt that's on our shoulders as Muslims living in Charlotte. So we need volunteers, and the people that are interested, we want you to come. You have to be vaccinated. That's one of the conditions to go and volunteer at the location. You have to be vaccinated. It's a $250 sponsorship. We already found someone who will sponsor for the month of Ramadan, but for the rest of the year, we're hoping to get maybe $2,000 so that we can pay for that 1 week that we will go and sponsor at the masjid. So we're going to feed the homeless. We're going to feed people at least once a month, and if we can do more, inshallah, we'll do more. That's one program. Also, like we mentioned a few weeks ago, we're also going to have iftars in the masjid. So we're going to have on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, iftars, community iftars. People are welcome to sponsor, or they're welcome to arrange food for here, Rahma Center. We're going to have Ramadan iftar here in the masjid. If you want more information, you want to see bookings, you want to see how many dates are still available, you can talk to Brother Nader, he's standing right there. But we want to feed people. We need to get in the habit of feeding people. There's immense barakah, blessings. If you look at the awliya, if you look at the salihin, a lot of the work that they did as part of their da'wah was feeding people. If you look at subcontinent, if you look at other parts of the world, da'wah never was divorced from feeding someone food. When you feed someone, they're going to listen to you, right? So we have to get back into that mindset. If we want da'wah to be a part of our identity as Muslims living in Charlotte, then we have to start by feeding people. And even if they don't accept, we're feeding someone who's hungry. Even that is enough as a good deed in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah give us tawfiq, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us and make it easy for us to preach for yourself. السلام عليكم. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. الحمد لله الذي فضل نبينا شفيعا وعلى كل من هو محبوب ومرجو لديه صلاة تبقى وتدوم بدعاء الملك الحي القيوم. واشهد ان لا اله الا الله وحده لا شريك له واشهد ان سيدنا مولانا محمد عبده ورسوله بالهدى ودين الحق ارسله. اما بعد فيا المؤمنون رحمنا ورحمه الله تعالى اوصيكم نفسي بتقوى الله عز وجل في السر والاعلان فان التقوى سنام الايمان. واذكروا الله عند كل شجر وحجر واعلموا ان الله بما تعملون بصير وان الله ليس بغافل عما تعملون. فان السنن هي الانوار وزينوا قلوبكم بحب هذا النبي الكريم عليه وعلى اله افضل الصلاه والتسليم. فان الحب هو الايمان كله. الا لا ايمان لمن لا محبه له. الا لا ايمان لمن لا محبه له. الا لا ايمان لمن لا محبه له. رزقنا الله تعالى واياكم حب حبيبه هذا النبي الكريم عليه وعلى اله افضل الصلاه والتسليم كما يحب ربنا ويرضى. ومن يعمل مثقال ذره خيرا يراه ومن يعمل مثقال ذره شرا يراه. بارك الله لنا ولكم بالقرآن العظيم ونفعنا وإياكم بالآيات والذكر الحكيم. إنه تعالى ملك كريم جواد بر رحيم. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المؤمنين والمؤمنات إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور انفسنا ومن سيئات اعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له. ونشهد ان لا اله الا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد ان سيدنا مولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله بالهدى ودين الحق ارسله لا سيما على اولهم بالتصديق وافضلهم بالتحقيق المولى الامام الصديق امير المؤمنين سيدنا ومولانا الامام ابي بكر الصديق رضي الله تعالى عنه. وعلى أعلى الأصحاب وسيد المنبر والمحراب الموافق لوحي الكتاب سيدنا مولانا الإمام أمير المؤمنين وغير المنافقين وإمام المجاهدين رب العالمين أبي حفص عمر بن الخطاب رضي الله تعالى عنه. وعلى جامع القرآن كامل الحياء والإيمان سيدنا مولانا الإمام أمير المؤمنين وإمام المتصدقين رب العالمين أبي عمرو عثمان بن عفان رضي الله تعالى عنه. وعلى أسد الله الغالب إمام المشارق والمغارب سيدنا مولانا الإمام أمير المؤمنين وإمام الواصلين إلى رب العالمين أبي الحسن علي بن أبي طالب كرم الله تعالى وجهه. وعلى سائر فرق الأنصار والمهاجرة وعلينا معهم يا أهل التقوى وأهل المغفرة. اللهم انصر من نسل سيدنا مولانا محمد صلى الله تعالى عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. ربنا يا مولانا واجعلنا منهم واخبر من خبر دين سيدنا مولانا محمد